Hi, it's Tuesday, June 3rd, and we're tracking our first disturbance of the 2025 Atlantic hurricane season today in the form of all this convection that's firing off the east coast of Florida in the western Atlantic. And this is likely to lead to low pressure development over the coming days. And as this gradually lifts north, it may lead to some subtropical or tropical development over the coming days. Now, I'll also be talking about my updated hurricane season forecast towards the end of the video. So I'll leave a timestamp to that part of the video if you would like to see that first. We're going to talk about the southeast coast system first. Just thought I'd mention, though, that my hurricane season forecast update will be included within this. So if we look at the pattern that's facilitating all this convection, we see a pretty classic early season development pattern for the southeast coast. You can see this big ridge developing, or coming east rather, across the Great Lakes into the northeast. And this is cutting off a upper trough, shortwave trough that has been tracking through the southern United States over the past few days. And so we now have this upper trough, maybe upper level low, that's been cut off here and is sitting in the northeastern Gulf. And this is very common and very favorable for early season development because with these upper troughs comes a lot of divergence. You can see all these cirrus clouds rushing away in a very fast manner away from this part of the world. And so this facilitates rising air across this part of the basin and can lead to a lot of convection that we're seeing now form today. And so usually you see non-tropical formation out of this initially because this is much more baroclinic forcing than tropical processes. But once an area of low pressure forms, if it can stay over the water long enough, it's possible that with a warm Gulf Stream here, it acquires subtropical or tropical characteristics. And models have tried to show this over the past few days. This is a GFS out to tomorrow afternoon, and you can see this very sharply kinked trough, which is now coming into the Georgia and South Carolina coast on this run. Now, there's been some variants on model runs over the past few days. Some have shown a scenario like the GFS where it just comes right ashore into the Carolinas. This would be a scenario where we likely don't see tropical development occur out of this. But there have been some models more like the European, which have kept this low just offshore and allowed for an attempt, at least, at subtropical or tropical transition. Though, even though this is a classic development, this is not optimal in the way that we would normally want if you want tropical development to occur off the southeast coast. And I can show you this better if we diagnose this on the upper level wind plot from the GFS. And this is showing you the upper level winds, basically what I was just showing you on the water vapor imagery. And you can see all this strong flow over the southeastern United States and western Atlantic. That's all the divergence that's causing all the thunderstorms to form here across the Bahamas and Florida. And here's the trough axis where the line kinks in these streamlines. And pay attention to the way this is oriented. It goes from northeast to southwest. This is a positively tilted trough. Ideally for this, you would want a negatively tilted trough, which is northwest to southeast. And the reason for that is because of the way the wind goes around these troughs. You can see that as this system is lifting north, we still have, and I'll go out to tomorrow afternoon, this is by the time the system is along the South Carolina and Georgia coast, it's lifting north, but it still has a pretty strong southwesterly shear cutting across it. If this trough was negatively tilted, the winds around this would be turning more towards the northwest on the eastern flank of this trough, more in line with the steering vector of where that system would be going. So this kind of an orientation that this trough is in is less favorable for development of this system. Now, that doesn't completely rule out chances of development. We do still have a low pressure forming near the Gulf Stream, which is very warm water. It is above average this year. So it's possible that we see some development attempted here, though it seems more likely that we'll just see a large, massive convection lift north here with a non-tropical low and lead to flooding issues in the Carolinas and Georgia over the coming days. And that's what most models expect now, and the National Hurricane Center only gives the system about a 10% chance of developing, which I'm in agreement with, as this does not seem overly favorable for this. But it is a reminder that we are now in hurricane season, so now is the time to prepare, and we may be seeing some development later down the line in May, not in May, June, as we look towards the Caribbean and Bay of Campeche for potential development during the mid part of the month. Now, we'll talk about that another day. The next thing I want to talk about is my updated seasonal forecast, as I made one in late April, and there were some uncertainties that left me unsure of if I wanted to go fully above average on that forecast back in late April. But now we're in June, so we've had a whole month since that forecast to see how the patterns trend and see how climate models trend as well. And so if we look at what we always look at, the global sea surface temperature anomaly plot, it is fairly similar to what we saw back in late April. As you would expect, these patterns in the oceans don't tend to change very fast. We can still see this enso neutral signal with some cold here in the eastern part of the Pacific, but not really a strong La Nina nor El Nino signal showing up. And we also have this negative Pacific meridional mode, or PMM. That's this colder water east of Hawaii and west of Mexico. And across the Atlantic, we can also see a similar pattern with a more negative Atlantic tripole showing up, with this colder water south of Greenland, warmer in the subtropics, and colder west of Africa. Now, you may look at that and think that I'm not changing my forecast all too much, and that is fairly true. I'm not drastically changing my forecast, but I am this month leaning more towards an above average hurricane season, more so average to above average. And the reason for that is because we have seen some things trend differently than what we were looking at in late April. The main thing is the ENSO region across the equatorial Pacific. There was uncertainty in climate model guidance where the North American batch were saying cold neutral, maybe La Nina. The European climate model was saying warm neutral, maybe El Nino. But in last month's European run, we saw it trend down onto more of a neutral to cold bias neutral showing up here in the Pacific. And just for comparison, this is the May forecast, and this is the month prior. This is April 2025, and you can see it's a much warmer signal than it had in May. And so this is a trend towards the North American climate model consensus from the European model. Now, we'll have to see if this does continue to trend this way. The next forecast comes out in about 5 days, I believe. But this is now more agreement from climate models saying that we're probably going to be around ENSO neutral, maybe a weak cold bias neutral as we go into peak of hurricane season. That's so important because if you have colder water here, even in a cold bias neutral and not full-blown La Nina, that's still suppressing this part of the Pacific and leading to more sinking air across this part of the world, which can help decrease wind shear across the Atlantic. Now, another thing that has also caught my eye is this warm bubble of water off the west coast of Europe. You can see all this warm water that's been developing over the past month. And this is going to be translating over the coming months down southwest along the Canary Current and is probably going to lead to this MDR region west of Africa warming up as we head into the peak months of hurricane season. So with this and this into consideration, I've now upped my forecast a little bit from late April, now showing an average to above average hurricane season on this forecast, more in line with what NOAA had in their forecast, with 14 to 19 tropical storms, 7 to 10 hurricanes, and 3 to 5 major hurricanes, and an accumulated cyclone energy index of 100 to 150 units, which is basically saying I expect 100% to 150% of normal activity this hurricane season. So another active one likely incoming here, and this is just a reminder again that we're now in hurricane season, and these early months are typically quiet. June and July are never truly active, and last year was certainly an anomaly with Hurricane Beryl. But now is the time to prepare before we get into peak season months for the hurricane season. And you can go to ready.gov for information on how you can prepare, and I'll leave a link to that at the top of the description. That's all that I've got for you today. I may have another video on this system if it develops more off the southeast coast, though I suspect the next thing we'll be talking about is more development in the Pacific, as we may be seeing some more development in the East Pacific and West Pacific over the next week. But as of right now, that's all I've got for you, so thanks for watching.